I wasn't supposed to be home yet. A canceled meeting had me returning earlier than expected. As I approached the door, I heard my own snoring, the unmistakable rumble that my wife had apparently recorded without my knowledge, followed by howls of amusement from her friends. "Oh my God, play it again," one of them shrieked between fits of laughter. "I can't believe he sounds like a dying lawn mower." I froze outside the door, my hand hovering over the handle. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not just the recording, though that was violation enough, but the mockery, the entertainment at my expense. My wife's voice came through clearly. "Wait until you hear when he hits the high notes." More laughter. My jaw tightened as I listened to 5 women, my wife and her 4 closest friends, turning an intimate, vulnerable moment into public spectacle. I stepped back, deciding against an immediate confrontation. That would be reactive, emotional. Instead, I quietly retreated to my home office, the wheels already turning in my mind. Over the next hour, I heard them moving to the kitchen, their voices carrying through the vents. And that's when something interesting happened. As glasses of wine loosened tongues, my wife began talking about her friends, the same ones sitting at our kitchen island, in ways that shocked even me. "Can you believe Amanda wore that dress today?" After I specifically told her it would make her look wider in the hips. But she never listens. A brief silence followed, then forced laughter from who I assumed was Amanda. My wife continued, oblivious to how her words landed. "And Jessica, I love you, but seriously, your husband was practically drooling over the waitress last weekend." Everyone noticed. I didn't want to say anything. I leaned against the wall, listening intently. This wasn't new behavior. For years, I'd overheard my wife speaking pleasantly to someone's face, then tearing them apart the moment they left. I'd always dismissed it as harmless venting, but now, after being made the butt of their jokes, these conversations took on new significance. By the time I heard them preparing to leave, I had a complete picture. My wife had specific, cutting critiques about each friend: Amanda's weight and fashion choices, Jessica's struggling marriage, Kimberly's financial problems that she hid with credit cards, and Rachel's obvious cosmetic procedures that everyone pretended not to notice. I finally emerged from my office as they were saying goodbyes, pretending I'd just arrived. The women gave me knowing looks, poorly suppressed smirks that told me they'd all enjoyed my unintentional audio performance. My wife kissed my cheek, unaware that anything was amiss. "You're home early," she said, hand lingering on my arm. I smiled warmly, the perfect picture of ignorance. "Just got in. How was Ladies' Day?" "The usual," she replied with a dismissive wave. "Just catching up." I nodded, already formulating my response. This wouldn't be a confrontation. That would be too simple, too expected. No, this situation called for something more sophisticated. If my wife enjoyed sharing private moments for entertainment, perhaps her friends would appreciate knowing what she really thought of them. As I helped clean up the wine glasses and appetizer plates, I noticed my wife's phone on the counter, still open to the video of me snoring. I deleted it without comment, but my mind was already crafting a far more impactful plan. Every relationship has its boundaries, and she had just crossed one of ours. Now it was time to demonstrate exactly why that had been a mistake. Over the next week, I became a silent observer, carefully documenting every backhanded comment my wife made about her friends. I carried a small notebook, jotting down her exact words whenever she'd call one of them after a gathering. The hypocrisy was staggering. Warm embraces and compliments in person, followed by brutal critiques once they were gone. "Did you see how desperate she looked flirting with the bartender? Her marriage must be even worse than she admits," she'd say about Jessica while texting her heart emojis simultaneously. Or about Rachel. "Those new fillers make her look like she's having an allergic reaction." I don't have the heart to tell her everyone's talking about it behind her back. The recordings continued as well. Twice more I discovered my wife had captured my snoring, sharing it with different groups as her personal comedy routine. Each time, I remained outwardly oblivious, strengthening her belief that I was unaware. The opportunity to begin my plan came when my wife announced she was hosting a dinner party that weekend. All 4 friends and their partners would attend. Perfect timing. I spent the days leading up to it positioning myself as the charming, attentive husband. I offered to help with preparations, suggesting I could handle the bar and keep everyone's glasses full. "You seem unusually interested in this dinner," My wife remarked suspiciously as I arranged the living room furniture to create intimate conversation spaces. I shrugged casually, just trying to be supportive. These people are important to you. The night of the dinner arrived, and I dressed impeccably, crisp button-down, tailored pants, subtle cologne. Looking in the mirror, I reminded myself, patience, precision, impact. This wasn't about petty revenge. This was about consequences for broken trust. The guests arrived in pairs. I greeted each with warm handshakes and personalized drinks I'd prepared based on preferences I'd noted from previous gatherings. My wife watched with surprised approval as I transformed into the ultimate host. "I didn't know you paid such close attention," she whispered as I handed Jessica her preferred gin with exactly 3 cucumber slices. "I notice everything," I replied, a statement more loaded than she could possibly understand. As dinner progressed, I maneuvered conversation with surgical precision. When Amanda mentioned struggling with a new diet, I sympathized. That must be frustrating. Though I heard an interesting perspective recently, something about how certain styles can create the illusion of different body shapes regardless of weight. Amanda's eyes flickered toward my wife, who suddenly became intensely interested in her plate. The comment landed exactly as intended, vague enough to seem innocent, specific enough that Amanda recognized the echo of my wife's private criticism. Later, when Jessica mentioned planning a weekend getaway with her husband, I nodded enthusiastically. That sounds perfect. A chance to reconnect without distractions. No waitresses or outside temptations. Jessica's expression hardened momentarily. My wife choked on her wine. By dessert, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. The women exchanged glances with new wariness. My wife's smile had become fixed, her eyes darting between me and her friends with growing alarm. She recognized the pattern but couldn't call it out without exposing herself. As the evening wound down, I overheard Rachel whisper to Amanda in the hallway. "Did you tell him what she said about your weight?" That comment about styles wasn't coincidental. I smiled to myself, mixing another round of drinks in the kitchen. Phase 1 had been executed flawlessly. The seeds of doubt were planted. Now it was simply a matter of nurturing them to full bloom over the coming weeks. "Everything okay?" my wife asked, entering the kitchen with empty plates, her voice tight with suspicion. "Absolutely perfect," I replied, handing her a fresh glass of wine. "Your friends are fascinating people. I feel like I'm really getting to know them, and they're getting to know us on a much deeper level." The look that crossed her face told me she understood the underlying message. This was just the beginning. The dinner party had accomplished exactly what I intended, creating hairline fractures in the foundation of my wife's friend group. Over the following days, I noticed her phone buzzing more frequently, conversations shifting to hushed tones when I entered the room. She was in damage control mode, though she never directly confronted me about my subtle comments. 2 weeks later, Kimberly announced she was hosting a pool party at her recently renovated home, a renovation funded entirely by credit cards, according to my wife's private rants. This presented the perfect opportunity to escalate my strategy. As we prepared to leave for the party, my wife seemed unusually tense. "You're coming just to swim, right?" she asked, adjusting her cover-up in the mirror. "No need to play bartender or anything." I smiled innocently. "Of course, just looking forward to relaxing with everyone." Her eyes met mine in the reflection, searching for any hint of my true intentions. Finding none, she nodded cautiously and grabbed her bag. Kimberly's backyard had been transformed into a magazine-worthy entertainment space, complete with an infinity pool overlooking the valley. As guests arrived and complimented the stunning setup, I watched Kimberly beam with pride while my wife shifted uncomfortably beside me. "This must have cost a fortune," I remarked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Worth every penny of financing, I'm sure. Sometimes the right investments make sense, even if they stretch the budget." Kimberly's smile faltered slightly. My wife dug her nails into my arm and pulled me aside. "What are you doing?" she hissed. I maintained perfect composure. "Just making conversation." "Why? Is something wrong?" She released my arm, unable to explain without revealing that she'd told me about Kimberly's financial secrets. I used her momentary confusion to slip away, making my way toward Jessica and her husband by the outdoor bar. Jessica's husband was indeed attractive in a conventional way, and he clearly knew it. I observed him checking out several women as Jessica pretended not to notice. "Perfect. Great party," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. Though it must be difficult to focus on conversation with so many distractions. I glanced meaningfully around the pool area where several women lounged in swimwear. Jessica stiffened. Her husband laughed nervously. Especially for men with wandering eyes, I continued smoothly. My wife mentioned after our dinner that the restaurant staff last month were particularly attractive. You two were there that night, right? Jessica's face darkened as she turned to her husband. Which waitress was he talking about? The blonde you couldn't stop staring at. I excused myself as their heated whispers began, making my way to Rachel, who was sitting alone applying sunscreen. New swimsuit? I asked pleasantly. Yes, actually. She smiled, seeming pleased I'd noticed. It suits you, I said. Very flattering around the jawline especially. Makes everything look completely natural. Her hand instinctively touched her recently filled cheeks, eyes darting around to see if anyone had overheard. My wife, watching from across the pool, looked ready to dive in fully clothed just to stop me from continuing my circuit. Too late. I'd already moved on to Amanda, who was arranging food at the buffet table. She'd chosen a loose-fitting kaftan despite the heat. Smart choice, I commented, gesturing to her outfit. Much more comfortable than trying to force yourself into styles that fight against your natural shape. Her expression crumpled momentarily before she composed herself. Did your wife say something to you about my weight? I feigned surprise. Not at all. Why would you think that? By mid-afternoon, the atmosphere had transformed from celebratory to tense. The four women had clustered together by the shallow end, throwing glances my way as they whispered urgently. My wife was trapped between defending herself and maintaining her facade. I floated peacefully on my back in the deep end, enjoying the chaos unfolding on shore. Eventually, my wife marched to the pool's edge. We need to leave. Now. I took my time swimming to the ladder, drying off methodically while she fumed. The drive home was silent until we pulled into our garage. I don't know what game you're playing, she said through clenched teeth, but you need to stop. I turned to face her, dropping all pretense of ignorance. Games. Like recording your spouse at their most vulnerable and sharing it for laughs. Or perhaps like telling your friends you love them while systematically tearing them down behind their backs. The color drained from her face as she realized I knew everything about the recordings, about her two-faced behavior. But instead of apologizing, she went on offense. You're trying to destroy my friendships. Do you have any idea how childish that is? I stepped out of the car, calm and unmoved by her outburst. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply speaking truths you've already spoken. If honesty destroys your friendships, perhaps they weren't built on solid ground to begin with. I walked inside, leaving her sitting in the car, the reality of what was happening finally sinking in. This wasn't just about the snoring video anymore. This was about years of disrespect toward me, toward her supposed friends, finally coming to light. And we were only halfway through the reckoning. The following week was a masterclass in tension. My wife fluctuated between icy silence and desperate attempts to normalize our situation. Her phone rang constantly, frantic calls from her friends demanding explanations for the comments I'd made, questions about what else she might have said behind their backs. Each time, she'd retreat to our bedroom, voice lowered but still audible through the door. Of course, I never said that about your weight. He must have misunderstood something. Why would I criticize your cosmetic work? You look amazing. No, I never told him your husband was checking out waitresses. That's ridiculous. Lie after lie, damage control spinning out of her control. I continued my daily routine, working, exercising, preparing meals, with perfect composure. When she attempted to confront me again, I simply shrugged. If you're worried about what I might say to your friends, perhaps consider what you've already said about them. The real test came that weekend. Rachel's husband was celebrating his 40th birthday with a large gathering at an upscale restaurant downtown. My wife spent hours getting ready, clearly dreading the social minefield ahead. Before we left, she grabbed my arm. Please, just be normal tonight. These are my oldest friends. I adjusted my tie in the mirror. I'm always myself. Isn't authenticity what friendships should be built on? She had no response to that. The restaurant's private room was filled with about 30 guests when we arrived. The tension was immediately palpable as the four women exchanged uneasy glances. Their husbands, still oblivious to the full scope of the situation, greeted me warmly. My wife clung to my side, monitoring every word. During cocktail hour, I maneuvered us toward a group that included Jessica and her husband. He was already 3 drinks in, his arm wrapped possessively around Jessica's waist while his eyes followed a server across the room. I suppressed a smile when I noticed Jessica tracking his gaze, her expression hardening. "Great turnout," I commented to the birthday honoree. "You must be proud to have such loyal friends." "Absolutely," Rachel's husband nodded. "Known most of these people for decades. That's the true test of friendship, isn't it?" I continued. "Knowing someone completely and accepting them anyway. Their struggles, their secrets, even their enhancements." Rachel's hand flew to her face again. My wife dug her nails into my arm. "Speaking of enhancements," I continued smoothly, "this restaurant's recent renovation is spectacular. Must have cost a fortune, much like Kimberly's new backyard setup." Kimberly, who had just joined our circle, froze mid-sip of her champagne. "Such impressive entertaining spaces," I mused. Though I always wonder about the financial wisdom of extensive renovations. Credit can be such a slippery slope. My wife suddenly developed a coughing fit, excusing herself. Kimberly's husband frowned. "We paid cash, actually." Kimberly's always been excellent with savings. I turned to Kimberly, whose face had turned scarlet. "I need another drink," she muttered, rushing toward the bar. The evening progressed like a slow-motion train wreck. With each carefully placed comment, I revealed another thread of my wife's duplicity. By the time dinner was served, the women could barely look at each other. Their husbands, finally sensing the undercurrents, exchanged confused glances. Midway through the main course, Amanda abruptly stood. "I just remembered we have a sitter deadline," she announced, though her husband's puzzled expression suggested this was news to him. "Happy birthday," she added stiffly before making her exit. Jessica and her husband followed shortly after, engaged in a heated whisper argument about his wandering attention. Kimberly remained, but spent the rest of the evening fielding suspicious questions from her husband about their finances. As dessert was served, my wife cornered me in the hallway outside the restrooms. "You've gone too far," she hissed, tears threatening. "You're systematically destroying my friendships." I regarded her calmly. "Am I? Or are you finally facing the consequences of your own words and actions?" "What do you want from me?" she demanded. "Accountability. Respect. The basic consideration you'd show a stranger, let alone your husband." She stared at me, mascara smudging beneath her eyes. "This is about the snoring video, isn't it?" "It was just a joke. It's about far more than that," I replied. "It's about trust. It's about character. It's about who you are when you think no one important is watching." We returned to the table in silence. The birthday celebration had devolved into separate islands of tense conversation. Rachel caught my eye from across the table, her expression conflicted, angry yet curious about what other revelations might be coming. On the drive home, my wife finally broke down. "How did you find out what I said about them? Have you been spying on me?" I kept my eyes on the road. "I've always been an attentive listener, even when you thought I wasn't around." Her face crumpled as realization dawned. All the time she'd thought she was alone on phone calls, all the conversations she assumed were private. I'd been present for more than she ever suspected. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That," I said as we pulled into our driveway, "depends entirely on your next move." The aftermath arrived like a tsunami. First came the text messages, my wife's phone lighting up at all hours with increasingly hostile accusations from her friends. Then the phone calls, which she took in whispered tones from our walk-in closet. Finally, a group email thread I wasn't meant to see but caught glimpses of on her laptop. 4 women dissecting years of friendship, questioning every compliment, every piece of advice, every seemingly supportive conversation. "I don't understand why you're doing this to me," my wife said over breakfast 3 days after the birthday party. Her voice was hoarse from crying, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes. I calmly sipped my coffee. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply speaking truths. You're twisting things I said in private. Are they twisted or merely inconvenient when spoken aloud?" She pushed her untouched plate away. "Jessica and her husband are considering marriage counseling because of what you implied. Kimberly's husband is demanding to see their credit card statements. Rachel's canceled her follow-up cosmetic appointment. And Amanda," her voice broke. "Amanda sent me a 3-page email detailing every time she thinks I've ever insulted her weight." I leaned back, regarding her with steady eyes. Interesting how the truth, even when delivered without malice, can have such profound effects. You had no right, she insisted. And you had the right to record me at my most vulnerable and share it for entertainment? To present one face to people who trust you while systematically undermining them behind their backs. Tears welled in her eyes again. It was just harmless venting. Was it? Or was it betrayal disguised as female bonding? Our conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. My wife froze, panic crossing her features. I rose to answer it. Rachel stood on our doorstep, her expression hard but composed. Is she home? I stepped aside, gesturing toward the kitchen. Rachel marched past me without waiting for an invitation. I followed at a respectful distance, positioning myself in the doorway, close enough to hear, but giving them visual privacy. We need to talk, Rachel announced. My wife nodded weakly. What followed was 20 minutes of raw confrontation. Rachel had compiled a list, actual handwritten notes, of comments my wife had supposedly made about her over the years, from critiques of her marriage to judgments about her insecurities and appearance. I need to know which of these things you actually said, Rachel demanded. My wife's defenses crumbled entirely. Instead of denying everything as she had been, she broke down, admitting to most of Rachel's accusations while trying to contextualize them. I was just letting off steam. You know how it is. We all do it. Rachel's voice remained steady. No, we don't all do it. Not like this. Not systematically, for years. By the time Rachel left, the dynamic had shifted completely. The power my wife once held in their social circle, the trusted confidant role she'd cultivated, had evaporated. Rachel made it clear that their friendship, if it continued at all, would never be the same. The pattern repeated over the next 2 days. Amanda arrived with screenshots of text conversations where my wife had mocked her to other friends. Kimberly came with her husband, both demanding to know why my wife had shared their private financial struggles. Jessica didn't come in person but sent a final message ending their 20-year friendship. Through it all, I maintained my distance, neither intervening nor offering comfort. This was the natural consequence of years of duplicity finally coming to light. By the weekend, my wife was despondent, barely leaving our bedroom. The group chat that had once buzzed constantly with their conversations had gone silent. The weekly brunches, shopping trips, and wine nights that had structured her social calendar for years were all canceled indefinitely. Finally, on Sunday evening, she emerged, red-eyed but calmer than she'd been in days. She found me in my home office and sat across from me, hands folded in her lap. I've had a lot of time to think, she began. About why you did this. About why I did what I did. I set aside my work, giving her my full attention. At first, I was just angry, she continued. It felt like you were deliberately destroying everything important to me. But then I started really looking at the patterns in my friendships, at my own behavior. Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. I've been terrible, not just to my friends, but to you too. Yes, I said simply. No accusations, no lecture, just acknowledgement of the truth. The snoring video, she said softly. It wasn't the first time I'd shared embarrassing content about you with them, was it? I held her gaze steadily. No, it wasn't. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't even know why I did it. It felt like bonding, somehow. Like we were closer because we shared these private jokes. At my expense. She nodded, ashamed. At your expense. And then I'd do the same with each of them. Share one friend's secrets with the others. It became a habit. A toxic one. For the first time in weeks, I reached across the desk and took her hand. Not forgiveness yet, but acknowledgement of her recognition. I've lost them all, haven't I? She asked quietly. Perhaps not all, I replied. But you've lost the relationships as they were. If any survive, they'll need to be rebuilt on honesty. She squeezed my hand weakly. And us? Have I lost you too? I considered her question carefully, recognizing the crucial turning point we'd reached. Everything that followed would depend on my answer, and on whether she was truly ready to change. That depends, I finally answered. On whether you understand what actually broke between us. She looked at me expectantly, her face vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't just about the snoring video, I explained. It was discovering that the person I trusted most was presenting two entirely different versions of herself, one public, one private. It made me question every interaction we've had, every confidence we've shared. My wife nodded slowly, wiping away tears. I never thought about it that way. But you're right. I've been living a double life, saying one thing to people's faces and another behind their backs. Including to me, I added. How many times have you reassured me about something, then complained about it to your friends? She winced. Confirmation enough. I need to show you something, I said, standing up. I walked to our bedroom closet and retrieved a small wooden box from the top shelf. Inside was a thumb drive that I placed on the desk between us. What is this? She asked. A recording. From 6 months ago. Your birthday dinner with the girls. Her eyes widened with recognition. You were home that night, but you said you had a work event. I came home early, just like the day of the snoring video. I heard everything, including your 30-minute breakdown of my failings as a husband, from the way I fold laundry to my career ambitions to our private moments. All performed with impressions and sound effects for your friends' entertainment. She covered her face with her hands. I was drunk. It was just silly venting. It was humiliation, I corrected firmly. And it was a pattern. The snoring video was simply the final straw. I took the thumb drive back, not offering to play it. The point wasn't to shame her further, but to establish the full context of my actions. If I'd confronted you directly, you would have minimized it, just as you're doing now. So I decided to show you exactly how it feels when someone you trust betrays that trust publicly. She sat in silence for a long moment, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, steadier, more grounded in reality. I deserved this, didn't I? All of it. I sat back down across from her. This wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. About removing the masks we wear and looking at the reality underneath. And what reality do you see? She asked softly. I see a woman who's spent years curating her image at the expense of authentic connection, who's used other people's vulnerabilities as currency in social transactions, who's built a network rather than true friendships. She flinched but didn't argue. But I also see someone capable of change, I continued. Someone facing hard truths right now instead of making excuses or placing blame. Hope flickered across her face. If we're going to rebuild, I said carefully, it has to be from the ground up. Complete honesty. No performances, no dual narratives. I want that, she whispered. But I don't even know where to start. With apologies. Real ones, not defensive explanations. To your friends, if they'll listen. And to me. She nodded, determination replacing despair. And then we establish new boundaries. What's private stays private. What's shared is shared with consent. No more using other people's trust as entertainment. Over the next few weeks, transformation began. She sent thoughtful, accountability-taking messages to each friend. Some went unanswered. Amanda responded curtly. Rachel suggested meeting for coffee in a month, once emotions had cooled. Kimberly sent a lengthy email about rebuilding trust gradually. But the real work happened at home. We started having dinner together without phones, discussing topics that mattered instead of gossiping about others. When friends or colleagues came up in conversation, I'd gently ask, would you say this to their face? At first, she'd catch herself often. Gradually, the habit began to break. 3 months later, Rachel's husband hosted another gathering, smaller this time, just family and closest friends. We were both surprised to receive an invitation. Are you ready for this? I asked as we prepared to leave. My wife took a deep breath. I think so. New rules. No talking behind backs. No performing for approval. No betraying confidences. And she smiled slightly. And if I slip up, I'll take full responsibility, not deflect or defend. As we drove to the party, I considered the journey we'd taken. From the wounded disbelief when I first heard the snoring video, through the calculated strategy of exposing her two-faced behavior, to this new terrain of rebuilding trust. It hadn't been pretty. It hadn't been easy. But something valuable had emerged from the wreckage of performative friendships and social masks. Something real. My wife reached over and squeezed my hand. Thank you, she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. For not just walking away when you discovered who I was. For making me face myself instead. I returned the pressure of her fingers. Just promise me one thing. Anything. No more recordings. Of any kind. She laughed, the sound genuine for perhaps the first time in months. Deal. As we pulled up to the house, I knew challenges still lay ahead. Trust, once broken, reconstruct slowly. But watching my wife walk toward the door, shoulders back, no mask of false charm in place, I felt confident we were finally building something authentic. Sometimes, The most powerful response to disrespect isn't walking away. It's standing firm and demanding better, not just from others, but from yourself. The man who filmed her true thoughts about her friends hadn't just exposed her duplicity. He'd created an opportunity for genuine transformation. And that was worth more than any friendship built on lies.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.